They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but the latest images of Jonathan Antoine have left the world completely speechless. When Jonathan first walked onto the world stage as a teenager, he was defined as much by his physical presence as he was by his powerhouse vocals. But as we move through 2026, the man standing before us is almost unrecognizable from that shy boy who once stood trembling in front of Simon Cowell. This wasn't just a casual fitness journey. It was a radical, life-altering metamorphosis that began during a particularly challenging stint in the United States. Jonathan has been remarkably candid about hitting a rock bottom in terms of his physical well-being. He describes a moment of clarity where he realized that he was essentially letting life live him, rather than taking the reins himself. By overhauling his lifestyle, he successfully dropped over 4 stone, roughly 56 pounds. But the numbers on the scale are the least interesting part of this update. He speaks about seizing the world with his hands, and finally feeling like an active participant in his own existence. For years, his size was used by the media as a shorthand for his identity, a gentle giant trope that he felt trapped within. Now, he shed that external shell to reveal a lean, focused artist who seems to have finally found his footing. It wasn't about vanity, it was about survival. He admitted that his previous habits were leading him down a path that would have cut his career, and perhaps his life, tragically short. This new version of Jonathan isn't just lighter, he's energized, moving with a confidence that was noticeably absent during his early 20s. He's no longer hiding behind baggy clothes or a hesitant posture. But as his physical frame began to shrink, the internal pressure he had been suppressing for a decade started to bubble to the surface, leading to a revelation that no one saw coming. While the world was applauding his high notes, Jonathan was privately navigating a series of dark periods that nearly forced him to walk away from music forever. To understand the gravity of Jonathan's recent update, we have to look back at the unstable moments that defined his early career. Behind that angelic voice was a young man dealing with profound internal heaviness. Long before his recent transformation, Jonathan faced what he describes as a nervous collapse during his time at the Royal Academy of Music. The pressure of being a prodigy, combined with the scars of childhood bullying, created a volatile emotional environment. He has spoken openly about times when he felt he might off himself, due to the sheer weight of public expectation, a topic we handle with care, but one that is central to his resilience. In the high-stakes world of classical crossover music, there is little room for vulnerability, and Jonathan felt he had to perform a version of happiness that didn't exist. He spent years in and out of various therapies, trying to put a name to the shadow that followed him even after sold-out performances. There were nights after major concerts where, instead of celebrating, he would retreat into total isolation, unable to process the sensory overload of the industry. This wasn't just stage fright. It was a deep-seated disconnect between his public persona and his private reality. Fans often wondered why he seemed so guarded in interviews, or why he disappeared from the limelight for long stretches of time. We now know that these absences weren't vacations, they were recovery periods. He was fighting to keep his head above water while maintaining the image of the success story the label demanded. It was a cycle of burnout and temporary fixes that couldn't last forever. The shadow was growing, and it was only a matter of time before he had to face the true source of his disconnect, leading to a discovery that would reframe his entire past. It took nearly 30 years for Jonathan to receive the one piece of information that would finally make his entire life make sense. In a move that has resonated with thousands of fans worldwide, Jonathan recently went public with his 2022 diagnosis of being on the spectrum. For most of his life, he lived with a persistent feeling of being wrong or alien, struggling with social cues and sensory environments that others found mundane. This diagnosis of autism wasn't a label of limitation for him. It was a key that unlocked decades of confusion. He describes the process of masking, a term used to describe how neurodivergent individuals force themselves to act normal to fit into society. Jonathan was masking on a global scale, pretending to be a conventional pop opera star, while his brain was processing the world at a completely different frequency. This revelation in 2026 has become the cornerstone of his new era. He stopped trying to hide his eccentricities and has instead started leaning into them. The awkwardness that critics once pointed out is now understood as a fundamental part of his brilliant, unique mind. He's been vocal about how the industry often tries to sand down the edges of artists to make them more marketable, but for someone on the spectrum, those edges are where the art lives. By sharing this, he's provided a powerful moment of representation for others who feel different. He's no longer apologizing for needing quiet time or for seeing the world through a different tint. This clarity has allowed him to look back at his time on Britain's Got Talent with a new perspective, realizing that the young boy on that stage wasn't just shy. He was overstimulated and brave beyond measure. However, this newfound self-awareness also forced him to reconcile with the people who tried to control his image in the early days, including one of the most powerful men in music. The moment Simon Cowell told Jonathan to dump, his singing partner is etched into TV history, but the fallout from that choice lasted far longer than the cameras were rolling. We all remember the dramatic ultimatum. Simon Cowell told a teenage Jonathan that he should go solo and leave his friend Charlotte behind if he wanted to be a star. Jonathan's immediate and firm no became a defining moment of integrity, but the industry doesn't always reward loyalty. While they did stay together for a time, the split was eventually inevitable. For years, speculation ran rampant. Did they have a falling out? Was there a legal issue or accusations behind the scenes? The truth, as Jonathan has recently clarified, was much more nuanced. The split was a result of two different creative trajectories, but the pressure from the Syco label to mold him into a specific kind of product was relentless. Being a solo artist under the gaze of a major label brought a different kind of suffocation. He felt like a commodity rather than a person, a feeling that was exacerbated by his then undiagnosed autism. The industry's demand for constant availability and perfect social interaction was at direct odds with his neurological needs. There were rumors of clashes with management and a struggle for creative control that left Jonathan feeling drained. He's hinted that the standard music industry path felt like a matrix he had to escape. His departure from the major label system wasn't a failure. It was an act of self-preservation. He needed to find a way to sing without losing his soul to a corporate machine that didn't understand how he functioned. This independence was the final piece of the puzzle, allowing him to enter 2026 not as a product of a reality show, but as a fully realized independent artist. He's finally calling the shots, and his latest work is a testament to what happens when an artist is allowed to be unfiltered. Jonathan's 2026 release, All of Me, isn't just a song. It's a manifesto for a man who is finally done hiding. As we look toward the March 2026 release of his new album, Speaking to You, it's clear that Jonathan Antoine has entered his most authentic phase yet. This new era is defined by a sound that blends his classical roots with a raw, contemporary vulnerability. He's no longer just singing the notes, he's telling his story. The lead single, All of Me, has been interpreted by fans as a direct nod to his transformation, both physical and neurological. He is literally giving all of himself, including the parts that were once considered too much or too different for mainstream television. In his latest updates, he speaks about the joy of the craft returning to him after years of feeling like it was a chore. He's performing with a level of vocal freedom that critics say surpassed even his viral The Prayer days. But more importantly, he's engaging with his audience on a human level. He's using his platform to advocate for mental health and neurodiversity, turning his personal challenges into a bridge of connection for others. The powerful moment we are witnessing in 2026 is the sight of a person who has navigated the fire of early fame, survived the darkness of mental health struggles, and come out the other side with a clear sense of purpose. He's no longer the boy from BGT. He's a 31-year-old man who has reclaimed his narrative. Whether he's talking about his 4-stone weight loss or his life on the spectrum, the message is the same. You cannot be truly successful until you are truly yourself. As he prepares for his upcoming tour, the question isn't whether he can still hit the high notes. We know he can. But rather, how far he can go now that he's finally stopped holding himself back. It's a masterclass in rebranding, not through marketing but through genuine, exposed truth. Jonathan Antoine's journey is a stark reminder that the most shocking transformation isn't the one we see in the mirror, but the one that happens in the mind. We've watched Jonathan go from a bullied teenager to global tenor, and finally to a self-assured advocate for authenticity. His 2026 update serves as a powerful case study in the cost of fame and the necessity of self-care. He could have continued to play the role the world gave him, but he chose the harder path, the path of truth. By shedding the weight, both literal and emotional, he's shown that it's never too late to recontextualize your life. As he moves forward with his new music and his new outlook, he leaves us with a thought-provoking question. If one of the most recognizable voices in the world spent a decade feeling unseen, how many others are currently masking their true selves just to fit in? Jonathan Antoine isn't just a singer anymore. He's a symbol of what happens when you decide to stop living for the applause and start living for yourself. The angelic voice is still there, but now it finally belongs to the man who's using it.